Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has welcomed the UN Security Council meeting held exclusively to discuss the situation in Indian occupied Kashmir. Khan said it is for the first time in over 50 years that the world's highest diplomatic forum has taken up the dispute. The Prime Minister said the UN Security Council meeting was a reaffirmation of 11 resolutions recognizing Kashmiri's right to self-determination. Khan said it is the responsibility of the Security Council to address the suffering of Kashmiri's people. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says Kashmir issue has been internationalized after yesterday's UN Security Council meeting. At a press briefing in Islamabad, Qureshi said Pakistan will intensify its lobbying efforts to highlight the situation in occupied Kashmir. The Foreign Minister said dedicated Kashmir desks would be created at Pakistani embassies all over the world. Meanwhile, military spokesperson Major General Asif Ghafoor said Pakistan is ready to thwart any misadventure by India. Ghafoor said Kashmiris would soon respond to India's illegal actions against them. Meanwhile, Pakistan's permanent representative to the United Nations, Dr. Maliha Lodhi, has said the voice of Kashmiris has been heard around the world through Friday's Security Council meeting. Earlier, in an interview with Indus News, Lodhi said the occupied Kashmir has been turned into a jail. Dr. Maliha Lodhi said several countries wanted an independent investigation into Indian atrocities in Indian occupied Kashmir. She also highlighted the other aspects of the UNSC meeting.
Two other aspects of the Council meeting are extremely important from Pakistan's point of view. One, the fact that the meeting took place at all testified to the international nature of the dispute and nullified India's claim and its propaganda that Jammu and Kashmir is an internal matter. Thirdly, or secondly, the most important aspect of the meeting was also that there was almost unanimous concern about the grave human rights situation in occupied Jammu and Kashmir.
Dr. Maliha Lodhi explained how serious the international community is taking the Kashmir issue.
We've entered a significantly different phase in terms of world attention on the plight of the Kashmiris. If you look at international opinion as reflected in leading newspapers like the New York Times, the Guardian, the Financial Times, you name it, and Western public opinion as reflected in these publications are very clear. Concern for human rights and urging India to halt its crackdown as well as its lockdown in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. In addition, if you look at the statements coming out from virtually every human rights organization, reputable human rights organization in the world, all have spoken out. All have asked India to halt the kind of restrictions, abuse, and violations that are going on.
Dr. Maliha Lodhi also told Indus News the steps Pakistan is going to take after this meeting.
We will assess the situation. We will see what would be the next step. But one thing I can assure you, Pakistan's diplomatic efforts, which have intensified since August 5 in response to India's illegal annexation of Jammu and Kashmir, those efforts will be stepped up, and we will continue to ensure that we are able to act on behalf of the Kashmiri people.
India's ruthless lockdown in occupied Kashmir has extended into its 13th day. For besieged residents, the block put on access to medical treatment has become a major concern. Occupied Kashmir is home to nearly 7 million people. They are suffering from Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's unilateral decision to revoke Kashmir's special status. Severe restrictions on movement and a communication blockade has created huge problems for the sick.
The biggest issue is that of access to doctors. Those who are lying sick in their homes, they very urgently need doctors. We're not getting medicines either, nor are we getting gas cylinders. Sick people are not getting proper medical facilities.
International community has expressed grave concern about India's gross human rights violations in occupied Kashmir. In a major development from Sudan, where the military rulers and the protest leaders have formally signed an historic power-sharing deal in Khartoum. The deal was inked during a ceremony attended by leaders of Sudan's neighbors and other international dignitaries. The signing brings into effect a constitutional declaration agreed on August the 4th. The transition deal was reached after months of public protests calling for civilian rule. The United States says Afghan peace talks are moving in the right direction. The White House statement came after U.S. President Donald Trump met with his national security officials to discuss the dialogue with the Taliban. The meeting was attended by Defense Secretary Mark Esper, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff General Joseph Dunford. Trump described the meeting as very good, saying the U.S. and Taliban are looking for a deal to end the war. The U.S. and Taliban representatives recently met for the 8th round of talks in Doha. The White House has approved an $8 billion sale of warplanes to Taiwan. The U.S. State Department says Taipei will receive 66 F-16s under the deal. China's foreign ministry says it has lodged a solemn representation with the U.S. against the sale. Spokesperson Hua Chunying says the deal violates the One China principle. This follows a $2 billion U.S. arms sales to Taiwan in July. It included 100 tanks and 250 Stinger missiles. China considers Taiwan a renegade province. The purchase comes amid heightened trade tensions between the U.S. and China. The U.S. Justice Department has obtained a court warrant for the seizure of an Iranian tanker captured by British Marines of Gibraltar last month. The court order came after Gibraltar judge allowed the release of the vessel detained for violating European Union sanctions on Syria. The warrant says the ship Grace 1 and the 2 million barrels of oil it carries are subject to forfeiture. It also ordered the seizure of $1 million from an account linked to Paradise Global Trading. The Justice Department claims the company is associated with businesses acting for Iran's Revolutionary Guards. Meanwhile, Grace 1 has been renamed, reflagged and moved its position, but is still anchored at Gibraltar. 15 civilians have been killed in a Russian airstrike in the northern Syrian province of Idlib. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says the air raid targeted refugee camps in the town of Fars. It says 16 children were among the dead. The French Foreign Ministry has condemned the attack and called for an immediate end to fighting in Idlib. Over the past week, the Syrian army has advanced towards the rebel stronghold of Al-Sheikhoun. Meanwhile, a U.S.-Turkey Joint Operations Center will begin working next week to oversee a safe zone in northern Syria. Turkey's defense minister says the two countries have reached a general agreement on coordination and control of the airspace. The statement comes after a U.S. delegation visited southern Turkey to begin work on the center. The joint center was agreed upon last week after days of tense negotiations between the two countries. The planned buffer near the Turkish frontier would be kept free of combatants and heavy weapons. Israeli forces have wounded 67 Palestinians during weekly protests along the Gaza border. Palestine's health ministry says Israeli troops fired live ammunition and rubber bullets at the protesters. The demonstrations are calling for Israel to lift its blockade of Gaza Strip. Officials say over 300 Palestinians have been killed since the start of the weekly protests last year. A Palestinian driver was also shot dead by occupation forces after he allegedly entered an illegal Jewish settlement block in the West Bank. Meanwhile, Israeli warplanes have struck 3 Hamas underground bases in the north and center of the Strip. Two ISIS militants have been killed in an Iraqi airstrike in the eastern province of Diyala. The head of Iraq Security Committee, Sadiq al-Husseini, says two of the terrorist group's financiers have also been captured. Al-Husseini says security forces acted on intelligence reports. Despite repeated military operations, he says ISIS remnants are hiding out in rugged areas near the border with Iran. Yemen's Houthi rebels claim to have launched a series of drone attacks on Saudi Arabia. 3 drones targeted at the Shaiba oil field in eastern province, causing a minor fire at a gas plant. Oil industry executives say the attack did not affect oil production. Earlier, the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen shot down a drone heading for Aba Airport in the south of the kingdom. No casualties were caused by either of the attacks. Russian opposition activists are staging another protest in Moscow after police detained thousands in recent demonstrations. The demonstrators defied a crackdown to demand free and fair elections for Moscow's city legislature. The protests are being held in single-person pickets in which one person holds a protest sign at a time. The Election Commission has disqualified a number of opposition candidates on technical grounds. The protesters are demanding their candidates be allowed to contest September's local government elections. Earlier, Moscow City Court overruled the Commission's decision, allowing opposition candidate Sergei Mitrokhin to contest the polls. 3,000 activists were arrested during the 2 recent demonstrations. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned with Indus. Welcome back. 8 people have been killed in a fire at a hotel in the Ukrainian port of Odessa. Emergency services said 10 others were injured in the blaze. It took firefighters over 3 hours to extinguish the fire, which incinerated an area of about 1,000 square meters. The authorities have not yet determined the cause of the blaze. Thousands of policymakers from 180 countries have gathered in Geneva to discuss plans to protect endangered species. Specialists will evaluate changes to regulations and species protection listings under the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. The treaty regulates trade in over 35,000 species of plants and animals. Science Secretary General Yvonne Hugueras says the conference will focus on extending protection to more species threatened by human activity. It will also devise mechanisms to help crack down on illegal trades and impose sanctions on countries that break the rules.
I'm very concerned at the prospect of further sales of stockpiled ivory. We saw the last sale back in 2008, and the following decade we've lost 100,000 savanna elephants, 60% of the forest elephants in Africa following that stockpile sale. And this has primarily been because these legal markets have opened up avenues for criminals to traffic illegal ivory into those markets and sell it.
The CITES meeting in Geneva comes amid warnings about a rapid decline in animal and plant species. A recent UN report said that 1 million species are on the brink of extinction. Now, moving on, German and Swiss scientists have found abundant levels of microplastic pollution in Arctic snow. The scientists have warned of significant contamination of the atmosphere and demanded urgent research. The widespread contamination of Arctic snow is an alarming situation. A team from the Alfred Wegener Institute analyzed snow samples in Germany. The scientists confirmed snow in all places contains high concentrations of plastic fragments. The worst contamination was found in samples from a rural area in Germany's southern province of Bavaria, totaling 154,000 particles per liter.
Scale, basically, where we used to just see plankton and zooplankton, now we're seeing quite a bit of plastic, both in the seawater, but now in the sea ice itself. And that's one thing that's interesting about sea ice. It's kind of a concentrator of everything that's in the water.
researchers found particles of nitrile rubber, acrylates and paints containing plastics in the samples. The experts confirmed pollen from near the equator ends up in the Arctic.
We have been able to sample ice cores from multi-year ice and from first-year ice here in the Canadian Arctic archipelago, and I think this is the first time that we can show people the presence of microplastic in this area.
The United Nations estimates 100 million tons of plastic have been dumped in the oceans to date. As sea levels rise due to global warming, time is running out for Indonesia's capital city of Jakarta. Environmental experts warn a third of the city would be underwater by 2050. As weather patterns change, large swathes of land have already begun disappearing at a faster rate. More in this report.
Indonesia's capital isn't only sinking because of rising temperatures. Rapid, out-of-control urbanization is also to blame. Without a piped water system, homes and local industry are forced to tap into natural aquifers. Experts say this practice causes some parts of Jakarta to sink 25 centimeters a year.
Back in 1981, this area was land, but it was muddy land. It could be flooded during a high tide, but just a little. Over the years, the water level is slowly rising.
The local government seems to have accepted the city's fate has already been sealed. Indonesian leader Joko Widodo has already announced the capital will be moving to the island of Borneo. Meanwhile, residents are hoping walls along the shoreline at the most vulnerable areas will keep the water from rising further.
Now, why has the water level become higher than my home? And I am now below water level? Maybe because the seawater is eating up the soil little by little. That's what I know. But luckily, we now have that seawall.
If groundwater extraction isn't curbed, the city could be gone within a few decades. Jakarta is home to 10 million residents.
In the US, deep-fried corn dogs and democracy are mixing at the Iowa State Fair. It is expected over 1 million people will be at the event this year, which is a must-stop for 2020 presidential hopefuls. 23 Democrats and Republican primary challenger to President Donald Trump will present their case to Iowa's people during the fair's 11-day run. This report has the details.
Thanks for stopping by to vote.
Here at the Iowa State Fair, visitors can vote for their favorite presidential candidate, more than a year out from the 2020 elections. The ballots at this largely agricultural fair are corn kernels, and the many Democratic candidates are all represented. On the Republican side, Donald Trump appears all but guaranteed his party's nomination.
The trend today is all Republicans are voting for Donald Trump. All Democrats are split, mostly with Biden at 35%.
Nice to see you again.
The former vice president is the frontrunner in national polls and is treated like a movie star here. But even the less well-known candidates hit up the fair, with the hopes of making a name for themselves in this early voting state. The fair is a crucial way for candidates to connect with the voters who could make or break their presidential dreams, but not without a little fun, in the form of pig races and fried corn dog tastings. Mike is taking his voting responsibility very seriously. The environmental activist went to see every single Democratic candidate at the fair this year.
Yeah.
I don't think it's dividing the party, but I think we need to start weeding some of them out to eliminate them. I think they need to self-select and say, I'm only at 1%.
The world where freedom.
In July 2020, the Democratic National Convention will finally reveal their pick to face Donald Trump. And this predominantly white and Christian state, whose population represents only 1% of voters in the U.S., will ultimately determine who stays in the race.
Hundreds of thousands of people have descended on Max Yasgur's alfalfa fields in New York to mark the 50th anniversary of the Woodstock Festival. Amid anti-Vietnam War protests, race riots and assassinations of figures like Martin Luther King, Woodstock's message of peace and love served as an antidote to the anger of young Americans.
I'm so happy to be here.
The Woodstock Festival is venerated as a beacon of hope that shone brightly in the tumultuous 60s. Its 50th anniversary kicked off with a performance by singer Arlo Guthrie, the son of folk revolutionary Woody Guthrie. He was one of the musicians who performed in that iconic 1969 weekend.
And I don't want to die.
fact that we're still here. Still singing, still playing, still going to shows and enjoying ourselves. Kept the spirit alive for a long time. And so here we are just trying to celebrate that. And thank you for showing up and being here.
The Woodstock Festival showcased a rock genre rooted in American folk. Aging hippies donning tie-dye kaftans, flower crowns, and fringed suede vests hark back to the golden age of peace, love, and music. People returned to the venue 50 years later to remember their youth and how their lives changed forever.
69, it's changed a tremendous amount. The weather is much better, but it's a good feeling to come back. I was 19 when I came out here, and it was quite an experience.
The historical Woodstock site is now operated by a non-profit group which holds regular concerts and runs a museum to honor the Woodstock legend. Lows and the highs of the business world. Now the US has excluded some Chinese-made household furniture, baby goods and internet modems from its next round of tariffs. The US Trade Representative's office says the 10% duties are scheduled to go on into effect on September the 1st. It says 44 categories of goods are no longer subject to punitive tariffs on $300 billion worth of Chinese exports. The excluded goods, which also include some chemical compounds, are worth about $7.8 billion a year. Earlier this week, the US delayed the imposition of more than half of its proposed tariffs until December the 15th. Chinese and the US Trade Representative will hold another round of talks in 2 weeks' time. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For further updates, stay tuned to Indus News.